The golden sun beat down mercilessly on Olivia Grayson's tear-streaked face as her father's words echoed in her mind. The agreement is final. You'll marry Jonathan Parker by month's end, or we lose everything. Standing at her bedroom window overlooking the dusty main street of Oro Blanco, Arizona, Olivia felt her dreams crumbling like the dry earth beneath the summer heat of 1878. Olivia dabbed her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, her slender fingers trembling. At 21, she had imagined a life of her own choosing, perhaps even finding true love someday. Instead, her father, Harold Grayson, owner of the failing Grayson Mining Company, had bartered her future to save his business. "It's the only way, Olivia," her father had explained earlier that morning, avoiding her gaze. "Jonathan Parker has agreed to cover our debts and invest in the mine. In return, he wants a respectable wife to help establish his position in society." His voice had softened then. "You'll want for nothing, dear. His fortune is considerable." "And what of my wishes?" Olivia had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wishes don't put food on the table or keep a roof over our heads," her father had replied sharply. "I've already given Parker my word." Now, watching the townspeople move about their business below, Olivia felt like a prisoner awaiting sentence. Jonathan Parker was nearly twice her age, a businessman from San Francisco who had arrived in Oro Blanco 6 months prior. He had cold eyes that calculated everything in terms of profit and loss, including, it seemed, a wife. A cloud of dust in the distance caught her attention. A lone rider approached town, his silhouette growing larger against the backdrop of the rugged mountains. There was something familiar about the way he sat tall in the saddle, confident yet at ease. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. Kyle Morgan had returned to Oro Blanco. 3 years had passed since Kyle left town to make his fortune in cattle. They had been childhood friends, and in those final months before his departure, something deeper had begun to bloom between them: shy glances, lingering touches, and one stolen kiss beneath the old oak tree by Miller's Creek. But he had left without a proper goodbye, and Olivia had buried those feelings deep within her heart. Now he was back, and Olivia felt those buried emotions stirring to life despite her best efforts to remain indifferent. She watched as he dismounted outside the saloon, his movements fluid and graceful. He looked different, broader in the shoulders, his skin bronzed by the sun, his dark hair longer. But even from a distance, she would recognize him anywhere. Olivia stepped back from the window, her heart racing. Kyle's return complicated matters that were already unbearable. In 3 weeks, she would be Mrs. Jonathan Parker, bound by duty and her father's promise to a man she could never love. A knock at her bedroom door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Olivia." It was Martha, their housekeeper. "Your father requests your presence downstairs. Mr. Parker has arrived for tea." Olivia closed her eyes, steadying herself. "Tell father I'll be down shortly." She moved to her vanity, pinching color into her cheeks and straightening her posture. The woman in the mirror looked back with resignation in her eyes. This was her duty, she reminded herself. Her father's business, their home, their standing in the community all depended on her compliance. But as she descended the stairs to meet her intended husband, the image of Kyle Morgan dismounting his horse played in her mind. A small, rebellious part of her heart whispered that perhaps fate had other plans. Jonathan Parker stood when Olivia entered the parlor, his tailored suit impeccable, not a speck of dust on his polished boots despite the town's perpetual layer of dirt. His thinning hair was precisely combed, his mustache neatly trimmed. "Ah, there she is," Harold Grayson said, relief evident in his voice. "Olivia, my dear, you remember Mr. Parker." "Miss Grayson," Jonathan said, taking her hand and pressing cold lips against it, enchanting as always. "Mr. Parker," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. "How kind of you to call." They sat for tea, exchanging pleasantries about the weather, the upcoming Founders' Day celebration, and Parker's recent business trip to Tucson. Olivia nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, playing her part perfectly while her mind wandered elsewhere. "I've taken the liberty of ordering your wedding dress from San Francisco," Parker said suddenly, interrupting her thoughts. "It should arrive next week." I've instructed the seamstress to include detailed measurements for any necessary alterations. That's very thoughtful, Olivia managed, though the idea of wearing a dress chosen by this man made her skin crawl. Only the best for my future wife, Parker replied, his thin smile never reaching his eyes. After all, you'll be representing Parker Enterprises at many important functions. Harold beamed. Jonathan has big plans, Olivia, not just for the mine, but for all of Oro Blanco. He's negotiating with the railroad to bring a spur line right to town. Indeed, Parker agreed. This dusty outpost has potential. With the right investments and proper management, it could become a vital hub between Tucson and the border. The way he said dusty outpost made Olivia bristle. This was her home, not simply a business opportunity. And what of the people already living here, she asked. The families who have built this town from nothing, Parker's smile tightened. Progress benefits everyone, my dear. Those who adapt will prosper, those who don't. He shrugged. Well, that's the natural order of business. The conversation continued, but Olivia heard little of it. Through the parlor window, she caught a glimpse of a tall figure walking down the street. Kyle Morgan. Her heart quickened. Excuse me, she said suddenly, rising from her chair. I just remembered I promised Mrs. Wilson I would help with the arrangements for Sunday's church social. Her father frowned, but Parker waved a dismissive hand. Of course, my dear. A woman's charitable activities reflect well on her husband. I encourage such community involvement within reason. Thank you for understanding, Olivia replied, fighting to keep the sarcasm from her voice. Father, I won't be long. Before either man could object, Olivia had fetched her shawl and exited through the front door. She needed air, space to think, and perhaps, if fortune favored her, a glimpse of the man who had once made her believe in possibilities beyond duty and obligation. The afternoon sun was still hot as Olivia made her way down the boardwalk. Oro Blanco had grown since its founding 15 years ago, though it remained modest compared to larger towns like Tucson. The single main street boasted a general store, a bank, the Silver Spur Saloon, a small hotel, a church, and various other establishments necessary for civilization in the Arizona territory. Olivia nodded politely to Mrs. Thornton outside the general store and exchanged greetings with Sheriff Davis as he made his rounds. All the while, her eyes searched for Kyle Morgan. She found him outside the livery stable, deep in conversation with old Mr. Henderson. Kyle was gesturing toward a chestnut mare, his expression animated. Even from a distance, Olivia could see the passion in his movements, so different from Parker's calculated restraint. As if sensing her presence, Kyle glanced up. Their eyes met across the dusty street, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Olivia saw recognition flash across his face, followed by something else, surprise, perhaps, or pleasure. Kyle said something to Mr. Henderson, clapped the older man on the shoulder, and began walking toward her. Olivia's first instinct was to flee, but pride kept her rooted in place. She was no longer the girl he had left behind. Olivia Grayson, Kyle said as he approached, his voice deeper than she remembered. I was wondering if I'd run into you. Kyle, she replied, striving for indifference despite her racing pulse. I heard you'd returned. He smiled, and Olivia felt that familiar flutter in her chest. At 25, Kyle had matured from a handsome boy into a striking man. His blue eyes still crinkled at the corners when he smiled, but there was a new confidence in his bearing. 3 years is a long time, he said, studying her face as if relearning its contours. Is it? Olivia raised an eyebrow. I suppose it depends on one's perspective. Kyle's smile faltered. I deserved that. You deserved nothing, Olivia replied evenly. You made your choice when you left without a word. A shadow crossed his face. I wrote to you. I received no letters. I sent them to your father's office, as you suggested, one every month for the first year. Olivia frowned. Her father had never mentioned any letters from Kyle. Had he intercepted them? The possibility sent a chill through her despite the heat. It doesn't matter now, she said, glancing around to ensure no one was paying them undue attention. The past is behind us. Is it? Kyle asked, stepping closer. Because when I look at you, Olivia, it feels very much present. A wagon rumbled past, forcing them to move closer to the boardwalk. In that moment of proximity, Olivia caught his scent leather, horses, and something uniquely Kyle. Memories flooded back of laughter shared by Miller's Creek, of his hand tentatively seeking hers during the town's 4th of July celebration, of that single, perfect kiss before everything changed. "I hear congratulations are in order," Kyle said, his voice carefully neutral. "The whole town's talking about your engagement to Jonathan Parker." Olivia's heart sank. Of course he would have heard. News travels fast in Oro Blanco. Parker's an interesting choice. Kyle's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I wouldn't have pictured you with a man like him." "We don't always get to choose our path," Olivia replied, more sharply than she intended. Kyle studied her, his gaze intensifying. "Don't we? I seem to remember a young woman who once told me we make our own destiny." "That young woman grew up," Olivia said, looking away. "She learned about responsibility and duty." "Duty," Kyle repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. "To whom, your father, a man you barely know?" "You know nothing about my circumstances," Olivia hissed, conscious of Mrs. Thornton watching them with interest from the general store entrance. "You left, remember. You don't get to question my choices after abandoning this town and me without a backward glance." Hurt flashed in Kyle's eyes, quickly replaced by determination. "I came back, didn't I? And I'm beginning to think my timing couldn't be better." Before Olivia could respond, the church bell rang out 4 times. She started, realizing how long she'd been gone. "I have to go," she said, already backing away. "Olivia," Kyle called after her. "This conversation isn't finished." She paused, torn between propriety and the undeniable pull she felt toward him. "Some conversations are better left unfinished, Kyle." "I don't believe that," he replied, "and neither do you." Olivia turned and hurried back toward home, her mind in turmoil. She had almost reached her front door when a realization stopped her cold. Despite the anger and hurt she felt, seeing Kyle again had awakened something she thought long dead: hope. That evening, Olivia picked at her dinner while her father spoke enthusiastically about Parker's plans for expanding the mine. "With his capital investments, we'll be able to hire 20 more men and dig deeper than ever before," Harold said, cutting into his steak. "Parker's bringing in new equipment from back east, steam drills that will double our production." "That's wonderful, father," Olivia replied automatically. Harold paused, studying his daughter. "You could show a bit more enthusiasm, Olivia. This marriage secures our future, your future." Olivia set down her fork. "May I ask you something?" "Of course, my dear." "Did Kyle Morgan ever send letters for me while he was away?" Harold's hand tightened around his knife. "What an odd question. Why would you ask such a thing?" "I saw Kyle in town today," Olivia said, watching her father carefully. "He mentioned writing to me." Harold's expression hardened. "That young man was never suitable for you, Olivia. A dreamer with grand ideas but no substance. If he sent letters, I certainly never saw them." The lie hung between them, as palpable as the tension in the air. Olivia had grown accustomed to her father's business maneuvers, but she had never thought him capable of such personal deception. "I see," she said quietly. "You would do well to avoid Kyle Morgan," Harold continued, his tone growing stern. "Your engagement to Jonathan Parker is the talk of the territory. Any impropriety would jeopardize everything we've worked for." "Everything you've worked for," Olivia corrected gently. Harold's face flushed. "I have always done what's best for this family for you. One day you'll understand that." "Perhaps," Olivia replied, rising from the table. "If you'll excuse me, I have a headache. I think I'll retire early." Her father nodded, concern briefly replacing his annoyance. "Of course." "Rest well, my dear." In her bedroom, Olivia sat at her window seat, watching as the stars appeared one by one in the vast Arizona sky. Her mind raced with questions. Had her father deliberately kept Kyle's letters from her? Had Kyle truly cared enough to write faithfully for a year? And most troubling of all, what might have happened if those letters had reached her? The next morning, Olivia woke with resolve burning in her chest. She needed answers from Kyle, from her father, even from herself. After breakfast, she announced she was going to help at the church with preparations for Sunday services, a task she volunteered for regularly. Instead, she made her way to the Silver Dollar Hotel where Kyle was staying. It was improper for an unmarried woman to call on a man in his hotel, but Olivia knew Mrs. Patterson, the hotel owner's wife, would be working the front desk. If she timed it right, she could speak with Kyle in the hotel lobby without causing too much scandal. Fortune favored her. As she entered the hotel, she spotted Kyle descending the stairs, hat in hand. "Mr. Morgan," she called, just loud enough to catch his attention. Kyle looked up, surprise and pleasure mingling on his face. "Miss Grayson, this is unexpected, Mrs." Patterson glanced up from her ledger, her eyebrows rising slightly before she tactfully returned to her work. "I was hoping we might continue our conversation," Olivia said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Perhaps a short walk." "I'd be honored," Kyle replied, placing his hat on his head as they stepped outside. They walked in silence until they reached the small town square with its single oak tree. Few people were about at this hour, most already at work in the shops, saloons, or mines that sustained Oro Blanco's economy. "You mentioned letters," Olivia said finally, turning to face him. "What did they say?" Kyle studied her face. "They said I was a fool for leaving the way I did. That I was building something worthwhile in Texas, a cattle ranch that would one day be ours. That I thought of you every day and counted the months until I could return to claim the promise we made to each other." Olivia's throat tightened. "We made no promises, didn't we?" Kyle stepped closer, his voice low. "That night by Miller's Creek, when I kissed you and you kissed me back, that wasn't a promise." The memory washed over her. They had been so young, so full of dreams and possibility. Kyle had whispered against her lips that he would come back for her once he'd made something of himself. "That was a lifetime ago," she whispered. 3 years, Kyle corrected. "Not long enough to forget the way your eyes light up when you laugh, or how you twist that strand of hair when you're thinking." He gestured to where her fingers were indeed twirling a loose curl. "Not long enough to forget what we could have been, what we still could be." Olivia dropped her hand. "I'm engaged to be married, to a man you don't love." "How would you know what I feel?" Olivia challenged, though the question lacked conviction. "Because I know you, Olivia Grayson," Kyle said softly. "I know that when you care about something, your whole heart shows in your eyes. And when you look at Jonathan Parker, your eyes are as empty as a dry well." Olivia turned away, unwilling to let him see the truth in her expression. "My father needs this marriage. Our mine is failing. Without Parker's investment, we'll lose everything." "So you're being sold to settle a business deal?" Kyle's voice hardened with anger. "Is that what you're worth to Harold Grayson? A convenient solution to his financial problems?" "It's more complicated than that," Olivia protested, though Kyle's words cut close to her own private thoughts. "It's exactly that simple," Kyle countered. "Your father's using you as currency, and Parker's buying himself a pretty wife to complete his image as a respectable businessman." A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek before she could stop it. "What choice do I have? If I refuse, father loses everything. We'd be destitute. The scandal would ruin us both." Kyle gently turned her to face him, his hand warm against her shoulder. "You have choices, Olivia, you always have." "Easy for you to say," she replied, brushing away the tear. "You had the freedom to leave, to build your own life." "I'm a woman in a world ruled by men's decisions." "Then let me give you another choice," Kyle said, his gaze intense. "Come with me. My ranch is doing well, better than well. I came back to Oro Blanco for you to make good on the promise I made 3 years ago." Olivia stared at him, scarcely believing what she was hearing. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," Kyle replied. "I built that ranch with you in mind, Olivia. Every fence post, every building, I imagined you there, making it a home." Hope, dangerous and bright, flared in Olivia's chest before reality extinguished it. "And what about my father? Am I supposed to abandon him to ruin?" Kyle's expression hardened. "Your father made his own decisions, poor investments, risky ventures. He created this situation, not you. You don't owe him your life as payment for his mistakes." Olivia knew there was truth in Kyle's words, but years of filial duty weren't so easily dismissed. "I need time to think." "Time is the one thing we don't have much of," Kyle reminded her gently. "When is the wedding?" 3 weeks from Saturday," Olivia replied, her voice barely audible. Kyle nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Then we have 3 weeks to find another solution, one that doesn't involve sacrificing your happiness." What do you mean? I mean I'm not leaving Oro Blanco until I've exhausted every possibility, Kyle said. There must be other investors interested in the mine, or other assets your father could leverage. Olivia shook her head. Father's tried everything. Parker was his last resort. Then I'll talk to Parker myself. Alarm shot through Olivia. No, you mustn't. He's not a man who responds well to interference. He could make things worse for father for both of us. Kyle hesitated, clearly unhappy but recognizing the wisdom in her words. Promise me something then. What? Promise you'll meet me tomorrow, and the day after, every day until your wedding. His blue eyes held hers, earnest and determined. Promise you'll give us these 3 weeks to find a way forward together. Olivia knew she should refuse. Meeting Kyle secretly would only complicate an already impossible situation. Yet the alternative, proceeding mechanically toward a loveless marriage without even trying to find another path, seemed suddenly unbearable. I promise, she whispered, committing herself to a course that could lead to salvation or ruin. As they parted ways at the edge of the town square, neither noticed Jonathan Parker watching from the doorway of the bank, his cold eyes narrowed in calculation. For the next week, Olivia met Kyle daily, sometimes for only a few stolen minutes, other times for longer conversations when she could justify her absence from home. They walked along Miller's Creek, sat beneath the oak tree in the town square, and once even rode out to the bluffs overlooking the valley. With each meeting, the connection between them deepened, their shared past blending with new discoveries about the people they had become. Kyle told her about his cattle ranch near San Antonio, 5,000 acres of good grazing land with a modest but growing herd. He had 2 trusted foremen running operations while he was away, men who had fought alongside him when rustlers tried to steal his first cattle drive. It was touch and go for a while, Kyle admitted as they sat by the creek one afternoon. That first year I questioned my decision daily, wondered if I'd been a fool to leave Oro Blanco to leave you. What changed? Olivia asked. Stubborn determination, Kyle replied with a smile. And a stroke of luck. A wealthy rancher from back east lost nearly half his herd crossing a river during the spring floods. I helped recover what I could and drove them safely to market for him. He was so grateful he backed me financially and introduced me to other cattle buyers. Olivia watched the play of emotions across his face, pride, humility, and underlying it all, a steadfast certainty about his path that she envied. And now, she asked, is the ranch everything you hoped for? Kyle's gaze met hers, direct and honest. It would be with you there. The quiet declaration hung between them, full of promise and complication. Meanwhile, Parker's grip on the Grayson family tightened. He began appearing at the house daily, discussing wedding plans, making decisions about the ceremony and celebration without consulting Olivia. He spoke of their future as if it were already written in stone, a house in San Francisco, social engagements with business associates, occasional trips to Oro Blanco to oversee his investments. Your father has agreed to transfer controlling interest in the mine immediately after our wedding, Parker informed Olivia during one such visit. I'll be implementing changes right away. What kind of changes? Olivia asked, a sense of foreboding settling over her. Efficiency measures primarily, Parker replied smoothly. The operation has been run too sentimentally. Several of the older miners will need to be replaced with younger men who can work longer hours. Olivia frowned. Some of those men have worked for my father since the mine opened. They helped build this town, and they've been compensated fairly, Parker said, dismissing her concern with a wave of his hand. Business isn't charity, my dear. You'll understand these things better once we're married. That evening, Olivia tried to discuss Parker's plans with her father, only to find him unusually evasive. Jonathan knows the mining business better than either of us, Harold said, not meeting her eyes. We must trust his judgment, even when it means dismissing loyal workers. Men with families to support, Olivia pressed. Harold looked tired, older than his 55 years. The agreement is already signed, Olivia. Parker now owns 49% of the mine. After the wedding, that increases to 60%. His money is already being used to pay our debts and purchase new equipment. Olivia felt the walls closing in, so even if I were to. She couldn't finish the thought, her father's gaze sharpened. Even if you were to what? Nothing, Olivia said quickly. I was merely thinking aloud. That night, unable to sleep, Olivia slipped from her bed and lit a small lamp. From beneath her mattress, she retrieved Kyle's letters, not the ones he had sent years ago, but the new ones he had begun leaving for her in their meeting places. Short notes, mostly, expressing feelings too dangerous to voice aloud in their brief encounters. One line in particular haunted her. There are always choices, Olivia. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is acknowledge them. As dawn broke over the Oro Blanco Valley, Olivia made her decision. She would meet Kyle one last time and tell him the truth that while her heart belonged to him, her duty bound her to Parker and her father. She would ask Kyle to leave town before the wedding, sparing them both the pain of what must come. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. When Olivia arrived at Miller's Creek for their meeting, Kyle was already there, pacing anxiously. His expression when he saw her was grim. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately concerned. "Parker knows," Kyle said without preamble, "about us, about our meetings." Olivia's blood ran cold. "How?" "We've been so careful." Not careful enough, apparently. "He confronted me outside the hotel this morning, made it very clear that he considers you his property already." Kyle's jaw clenched. "He threatened to cancel his investment in the mine if our association continued." "No," Olivia whispered, imagining her father's reaction. "That would ruin father completely." "That's not all," Kyle continued, his expression darkening further. "I did some asking around about Parker's business practices. Olivia, the man's reputation is built on destroying others. He finds struggling businesses, offers salvation with one hand while signing their death warrant with the other. Once he gains control, he strips the assets and moves on." "You mean the mine?" Olivia asked, struggling to process this new information. "The mine, the town, everything." "He's already purchased the land around Oro Blanco where the railroad spur would logically connect, but there's no railroad coming. It's all a ruse to drive up property values so he can sell to speculators at a profit." Olivia felt sick, and the miner's father has employed for years. Disposable in Parker's eyes. Word is he plans to bring in Chinese laborers who will work for half the wages once he has full control. "Father must be told," Olivia said, already turning back toward town. Kyle caught her arm gently. "He may not believe us." "Parker has him convinced this marriage is the only solution to his problems." "Then we'll find proof," Olivia insisted. "Documents, witnesses, something to show father what kind of man he's really dealing with." Kyle's expression softened, pride shining in his eyes. "There's the Olivia I remember. Fighting for what's right. Will you help me?" she asked, holding his gaze. "Until my last breath," Kyle promised. Together they formulated a plan. Kyle would travel to Tucson the next day to speak with business associates who might have documentation of Parker's previous dealings. Olivia would search her father's office for the investment agreement, hoping to find some clause or condition they could use to nullify the contract. As they parted, Kyle clasped her hand tightly. "Be careful. Parker's dangerous when crossed." "So am I," Olivia replied with more confidence than she felt. That evening, Olivia made her move. Her father was dining with Parker and other business associates at the hotel, giving her the perfect opportunity to search his study. She felt a twinge of guilt as she slipped the key from its hiding place in the library, but reminded herself that her actions, while deceitful, were ultimately to protect her father from a far greater treachery. The study was meticulously organized, reflecting Harold Grayson's methodical mind. Olivia moved directly to the large oak desk, opening drawers and carefully examining their contents. In the bottom right drawer, she found what she was seeking: a leather portfolio labeled Parker Investment Agreement. With trembling fingers, Olivia opened the portfolio and began reading. The legal language was dense, but certain clauses stood out with alarming clarity. Parker's investment came with stringent conditions: full operational control, the right to dismiss workers without consultation, and most disturbingly, a provision allowing him to sell the mine's assets without Harold's approval once he gained majority ownership. But it was the final clause that made Olivia's blood run cold. If she failed to go through with the marriage, Parker would not only withdraw his investment, but would call due a separate loan he had apparently made to Harold 6 months earlier, a loan secured by their family home and all personal assets. The implications were clear. If Olivia refused to marry Parker, her father would lose everything, not just the mine, but their home and any hope of starting over. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Olivia hastily replaced the documents and closed the drawer, straightening just as the study door opened. Jonathan Parker stood in the doorway, his thin lips curved in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Grayson, what a surprise to find you here." Olivia's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Mr. Parker, I thought you were dining with Father." "The dinner concluded early," Parker replied, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "Your father was called away to inspect some new equipment at the mine. He asked me to bring these contracts back to his study." He held up a leather folder similar to the one Olivia had just been examining. "How convenient," Olivia said, moving toward the door. "I'll leave you to it then." Parker didn't step aside. "Actually, I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to speak privately. We haven't had much chance for intimate conversation." Something in his tone sent a chill down Olivia's spine. "Perhaps another time." "I have preparations for the wedding, preparations overseen by others," Parker interrupted smoothly. "Your only task is to appear beautiful and compliant on our wedding day, a role I'm certain you'll fulfill admirably." Olivia bristled at his condescension, but maintained her composure. "If you'll excuse me, Mr. Parker, I saw you with Morgan this morning," Parker said, his voice hardening. "By Miller's Creek, a rather secluded location for a respectable engaged woman to meet a man not her fiancé." Olivia forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "Mr. Morgan is an old friend. We were simply catching up on the years since he left town." Parker's laugh was cold. "Do you take me for a fool, Miss Grayson? I've been watching you both for days. The lingering looks, the secret meetings, it's all quite transparent. You've been spying on me." Olivia asked, anger overtaking fear. "I protect my investments," Parker replied unapologetically. "And make no mistake, you are an investment, a necessary accessory to establish my position in certain social circles." "I am not property to be acquired," Olivia said, her voice low with fury. "No." "Then perhaps you should read the agreement your father signed." Parker's smile widened. "Your marriage to me is explicitly detailed as a condition of the investment. Breach of that condition results in immediate repayment of all funds your father no longer possesses." "That's unconscionable," Olivia whispered. "That's business," Parker corrected. "Your father sold you as surely as if he'd put you on an auction block. The only difference is the price was higher and the transaction more civilized." Olivia felt sick. Put in such stark terms, the arrangement seemed barbaric, yet it was merely an extreme version of marriages arranged throughout society. Property, influence, social standing, these were the currencies that often determined matrimonial matches, particularly among families of means or ambition. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "What I've already purchased," Parker replied coldly. "Your compliance. End whatever childish infatuation you harbor for Kyle Morgan. Be the wife I require, decorative, obedient, and above all, loyal to my interests. And if I refuse—" Parker's expression hardened. "Then your father loses everything: his business, your home, his standing in the community. He's already heavily in debt to me personally. Without my protection, his creditors would descend like vultures." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "And as for Morgan, there are many dangers in the West. Stagecoach robberies, mining accidents, barroom brawls that turn deadly. A man could disappear and hardly be missed." The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. Olivia felt cold fear grip her heart. "You wouldn't dare." "I've built my fortune by eliminating obstacles," Parker said simply. "Morgan has become an obstacle." Olivia tried to hide her terror, knowing it would only give Parker more power over her. People would ask questions. "The sheriff is deeply in debt to the bank I now control," Parker finished smoothly. "As is the mayor and half the town council. Do you truly believe anyone would risk their livelihood to investigate too deeply if something unfortunate were to befall a drifter like Morgan?" The walls seemed to close in around Olivia. Parker had maneuvered them all into an impossible position. Every path forward seemed to lead to destruction: her father's ruin, Kyle's endangerment, her own enslavement to a loveless marriage. "I'll expect you to be particularly attentive at dinner tomorrow night," Parker continued, apparently considering the matter settled. "The mayor and his wife will be joining us, along with several potential investors from Phoenix. Wear the blue dress I sent from San Francisco. It complements your complexion." With that, he finally stepped aside, opening the door for her to exit. Olivia moved past him on leaden feet, feeling as though she were walking to her execution rather than simply leaving a room. "Oh, and Olivia," Parker called after her, "I've arranged for Mrs. Whitmore to accompany you at all times until the wedding. A chaperone is appropriate for a bride-to-be, don't you think? She'll arrive tomorrow morning." A warden, not a chaperone, Olivia thought bitterly. But she merely nodded and continued up the stairs to her bedroom, where she finally allowed the tears to fall. Morning brought no relief. True to Parker's word, Mrs. Whitmore, a stern widow known for her rigid adherence to propriety, arrived promptly at 8 o'clock. "Mr. Parker has engaged me to assist with your wedding preparations, Miss Grayson," the older woman announced, settling herself in Olivia's sitting room as though preparing for a siege. "I'll accompany you on all errands and social calls until your wedding day." Olivia's heart sank. With Mrs. Whitmore as her shadow, meeting Kyle would be impossible. Even passing a note to him would be noticed and reported. The day unfolded with excruciating slowness. Mrs. Whitmore supervised a final fitting for Olivia's wedding dress, a confection of ivory silk and Belgian lace that felt more like armor than attire. They reviewed the guest list, examined flower arrangements, and discussed the reception menu with such tedious attention to detail that Olivia wanted to scream. Through it all, her mind raced. There had to be a way out of this trap, some option they hadn't considered. But every scenario she imagined ended with her father's ruin, Kyle in danger, or both. Late that afternoon, as they were returning from the dressmaker's shop, Olivia spotted Kyle entering the telegraph office across the street. Their eyes met briefly, and she tried to communicate her situation with a glance. "Miss Grayson, do pay attention to where you're walking," Mrs. Whitmore chided, following her gaze. "Ah, Mr. Morgan, I understand he's causing quite a stir since his return. Such a shame about his family farm." Olivia's attention snapped back to her companion. "What about his family farm?" Mrs. Whitmore looked surprised. "Why, I assumed you knew. The Morgan place was lost to back taxes while young Kyle was away seeking his fortune. Your father purchased it at auction, I believe. It's part of the Grayson mining property, now that north section they're preparing to excavate." The revelation hit Olivia like a physical blow. Her father had purchased the Morgan family farm, Kyle's childhood home, while Kyle was away building a future he had intended to share with her. The betrayal felt personal, calculated. "Are you quite all right, dear? You've gone quite pale," Mrs. Whitmore observed. "Just the heat," Olivia managed. "Perhaps we should return home." That evening's dinner with Parker, the mayor, and the Phoenix investors was a special form of torture. Olivia sat beside Parker, smiling politely as he spoke of his plans for expanding the mine and developing Oro Blanco into a modern commercial center. "The key is infrastructure," Parker was saying as the main course was served. "With the railroad connection I'm negotiating, ore can be transported directly to processing facilities in Tucson, cutting costs significantly." Mayor Wilson nodded enthusiastically. "It would transform our little town, no doubt about that. Bring jobs, growth, prosperity." "Precisely," Parker agreed. "Of course, progress requires difficult decisions, outdated methods, and unnecessary personnel must be replaced with more efficient alternatives." Olivia's fork paused halfway to her mouth as she recognized the implication. Parker was already laying the groundwork for replacing the town's miners with cheaper labor. "I understand some of those miners have worked the Grayson operation for 15 years or more," she said, unable to remain silent. "Their experience surely has value beyond mere efficiency." Parker's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sentiment has no place in business, my dear, a lesson your father learned too late, unfortunately." The conversation continued around her, but Olivia barely heard it. Her mind was fixed on a new and terrible understanding. Parker didn't merely want control of the mine, he wanted to remake Oro Blanco itself, replacing its heart and soul with his vision of progress. When the dessert plates were cleared, Parker rose to escort their guests to the parlor for brandy and cigars. As he passed behind Olivia's chair, he placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing slightly. To others, it might have appeared an affectionate gesture. Olivia felt it as the warning it was intended to be. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house had fallen silent, Olivia sat at her bedroom window. The town below was mostly dark, save for the lights of the Silver Spur Saloon and a few scattered windows. A movement in the shadows of the garden below caught her attention. A figure stood beneath the old oak tree, looking up at her window. Even in the darkness, she recognized Kyle's silhouette. Olivia glanced at her bedroom door. Mrs. Whitmore was sleeping in the adjoining room, the connecting door left ajar at Parker's insistence. Any attempt to leave would surely wake the light sleeping widow. Instead, Olivia opened her window slightly and dropped a handkerchief, a signal she and Kyle had used in their youth to indicate danger. She saw him retrieve it, look up once more at her window, and then disappear into the darkness. The next morning brought unexpected news. Sheriff Davis arrived at the Grayson home just after breakfast, his expression grave. "There's been an incident at the mine, Mr. Grayson," he announced when Harold met him in the foyer. "A cave-in at the north section." Olivia, descending the stairs with Mrs. Whitmore close behind, felt her heart drop. "Was anyone hurt?" The sheriff removed his hat. "3 men trapped, Miss Grayson. Rescue efforts are underway, but it doesn't look good." "I should go immediately," Harold said, already reaching for his coat. "Parker will want to be informed. Mr. Parker is already at the site," Sheriff Davis interrupted. "He arrived shortly after I did. Seemed quite concerned about the equipment." Olivia caught the slight hesitation, the hint of distaste in the sheriff's tone, so even the law in Oro Blanco was beginning to see Parker's true nature. "I'm coming with you, Father," Olivia declared, reaching the bottom of the stairs. Harold frowned. "A mining accident is no place for a lady, Olivia. Those men have wives, daughters, families," she replied firmly. "If the situation is as grave as the sheriff suggests, they'll need comfort and support." "Most improper," Mrs. Whitmore objected. "Mr. Parker would not approve. Mr. Parker is not yet my husband," Olivia cut in, surprising herself with her boldness. "And even when he is, I will not abandon my responsibilities to this community." Harold studied his daughter, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "Very well. But stay clear of the actual rescue operation. It could be dangerous." The scene at the mine was one of controlled chaos. Men rushed about carrying timber supports, tools, and buckets. A crowd of anxious family members had gathered, held back from the mine entrance by 2 deputies. Parker stood slightly apart, deep in conversation with the mine foreman. His tailored suit looked out of place amid the dust and grime, his polished boots carefully positioned to avoid the muddy ground. As Olivia approached with her father, she heard Parker's voice, tense with irritation. "Inexcusable negligence. Those support beams should have been replaced weeks ago." "We requested new timber last month, sir," the foreman replied, his weathered face streaked with dirt and sweat. "The requisition was denied as an unnecessary expense." Parker's expression hardened. "That's a matter for later discussion. For now, focus on containing the damage. The east tunnel must remain operational. 3 men are trapped, Mr. Parker," the foreman said incredulously. "Surely the priority is their rescue." "Of course," Parker replied smoothly, noticing Harold and Olivia's approach. "But we must be practical. Rescue efforts should not endanger the entire operation." Olivia felt sick at his callousness. Human lives were at stake, yet Parker spoke as if discussing a minor inconvenience. "Who are the trapped men?" Harold asked, his face pale with concern. The foreman consulted a dirt-smudged paper. "Martinez, Dawson, and—" He hesitated, glancing at Olivia. "Kyle Morgan. He volunteered to help when we were shorthanded this morning." The world seemed to tilt beneath Olivia's feet. Kyle was trapped in the mine, the Morgan family land that her father had acquired, now part of Parker's expanding empire. The cruel irony was not lost on her. "Kyle," she whispered, steadying herself against a wooden post. "Are you certain?" The foreman nodded grimly. "He's a good man with mining experience from his youth. Went in with the first rescue team after the initial collapse. Then the second cave-in happened." Parker's gaze fixed on Olivia, calculating and cold. "You seem particularly concerned, my dear." "I wasn't aware you were acquainted with Mr. Morgan." "Everyone in town knows Kyle," Harold interjected before Olivia could respond. "He grew up here." Parker's eyes never left Olivia's face. "Indeed, though I understood he'd been absent for some years. Pursuing cattle interests in Texas, I believe." The implication was clear. Parker knew exactly who Kyle was to the town and to Olivia. "What's being done to reach the trapped men?" Olivia asked, ignoring Parker's scrutiny. The foreman wiped his brow. "We're digging through from the main shaft, but it's slow going. The ground's unstable. Could be hours before we break through, if at all." "There must be something more we can do," Olivia insisted, fighting to keep her voice steady. "The situation is in capable hands," Parker said dismissively. "Harold, we should discuss contingency plans for production. This setback could delay shipments." "Setback," Olivia repeated, unable to contain her outrage. "3 men fighting for their lives is a setback." Parker's expression darkened. "Control yourself, Olivia. Hysteria helps no one." "Neither does callous disregard for human life," she shot back. A murmur ran through the gathered miners and family members. Parker glanced around, clearly aware that the exchange was being observed. "Perhaps you should return home," he suggested, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "This environment is clearly upsetting you." "I'm staying," Olivia declared firmly. "These people need support." Before Parker could object further, a shout came from the mine entrance. "We've made contact. They're alive." A cheer erupted from the crowd. Olivia felt hope surge through her veins as she hurried toward the commotion, heedless of Parker's disapproving glare. The rescue efforts intensified over the next several hours. Olivia remained at the site, helping the women who had set up a makeshift kitchen to feed the rescue workers. Her fine dress was soon soiled with dust and food stains, but she worked tirelessly, all the while listening for updates on the trapped men. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mining camp, a new shout went up. "We're through, they're coming out." Olivia rushed to the mine entrance along with the anxious families. One by one, the trapped men emerged, supported by their rescuers. Martinez first, then Dawson, both dirty and bloodied but alive. And then Kyle, his face nearly black with coal dust, a makeshift bandage around his head stained with dried blood. His eyes, startlingly blue against his filthy face, searched the crowd until they found Olivia. Without thinking, she pushed forward, reaching him just as his strength seemed to give way. Olivia caught him, heedless of propriety or the stares of onlookers, supporting his weight against her. "Knew you'd be here," Kyle murmured, his voice hoarse from dust and thirst. "SHH," Olivia soothed, helping him toward the medical tent that had been set up. "Save your strength." As they moved slowly through the crowd, Olivia became aware of Parker watching them, his face a mask of cold fury. Beside him, her father's expression was unreadable concern, confusion, perhaps even a dawning realization. In the medical tent, Olivia helped the doctor clean Kyle's head wound while nurses attended to the other injured men. The cut was deep but not life-threatening. More concerning was the possibility of internal injuries from falling debris. "You need rest," the doctor told Kyle firmly. "No exertion for at least a week." Kyle nodded wearily, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "Seems I've earned a holiday." Once Kyle was patched up and resting on a cot, Olivia stepped outside the tent to find Parker waiting. His control had returned, but anger still simmered beneath the surface. "Your concern for the injured is admirable," he said, his tone suggesting the opposite. "Though your attention to Morgan seems excessive, he saved those men's lives," Olivia replied evenly. "The foreman told me Kyle went back for Martinez when the second collapse began. Heroic, certainly," Parker conceded with a thin smile. "One might almost suspect he was trying to impress someone." Olivia met his gaze directly. "Is that so difficult to believe, that a man might act from genuine courage rather than calculation?" Parker's smile vanished. I warned you about Morgan. This display has been noted by the entire town. Your reputation, my reputation, is my concern, not yours, Olivia interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. At least until our wedding day, which approaches rapidly, Parker reminded her. 5 days, Olivia, after which your concerns become mine by law. The reminder was like a physical blow, but Olivia maintained her composure. 5 days is still 5 days of freedom. Now, if you'll excuse me, there are injured men who need attention. She turned to re-enter the medical tent, but Parker caught her arm, his grip painfully tight. Don't test me, Olivia. I can be a generous husband or a cruel one. The choice is yours. Olivia pulled her arm free. Then I already pity the woman who becomes your wife, Mr. Parker. The following morning, Olivia woke with renewed determination. The mine accident had clarified what truly mattered: not social standing, not financial security, not even filial duty, but the capacity to follow one's heart and conscience. She found her father in his study, reviewing reports from the mine. Harold looked up as she entered, his face haggard from lack of sleep. The North Tunnel is a complete loss, he said without preamble. Parker wants to abandon it entirely and focus on the eastern section and the men who worked that tunnel. Olivia asked, settling into the chair opposite his desk. Harold sighed. Reassigned where possible, some will be let go. With compensation, I hope. Parker sees no obligation there. The collapse was ruled an accident, though. Harold hesitated. Though what? Olivia pressed. Morgan claims the support beams showed signs of deliberate tampering, her father admitted reluctantly. The sheriff is investigating, but without evidence. Olivia felt cold dread wash over her. You don't think Parker would? I don't know what to think anymore, Harold interrupted, suddenly looking every one of his years. The Parker I thought I knew was a shrewd businessman but fundamentally decent. Now I wonder if I was blind to his true nature. Olivia leaned forward, sensing an opportunity. Father, it's not too late to reconsider this arrangement. Surely there must be other investors, other options. Harold shook his head wearily. The contracts are signed, Olivia. Parker has already invested considerably in the mine. If we breach the agreement now, we lose everything, not just the business, but our home, our standing in the community. Is that worth more than my happiness? Olivia asked softly. Than my entire future, her father looked stricken. I never meant, he broke off, collecting himself. I thought I was securing your future, ensuring you'd never know the hardship I faced in my youth. By selling me to the highest bidder. The words were harsh, but Olivia kept her tone gentle. Is that truly what Mother would have wanted for me? Harold flinched as if struck. Elizabeth Grayson had been dead for 10 years, but her gentle spirit still influenced their household. She had married Harold for love despite her wealthy family's objections, choosing happiness over security. Your mother would be ashamed of me, Harold admitted, his voice thick with emotion. As am I of myself, but I see no way out, Olivia. Parker holds all the cards. Perhaps not all, Olivia replied, an idea forming. Father, I need to know exactly what's in that contract, not your summary, but the precise wording. Harold hesitated, then nodded, pulling the leather portfolio from his desk drawer. See for yourself. Perhaps your fresh eyes will find something I've overlooked. Olivia spent the morning poring over the document, noting each clause and condition. The language was dense with legal terminology, but certain sections stood out with alarming clarity. The marriage clause was explicit. Olivia was to become Parker's wife by month's end as a condition of his investment. If the marriage did not take place, all funds would be immediately repayable, and additional penalties would apply. But there was something else, a provision regarding the mine's operation that caught Olivia's attention. Parker's controlling interest was contingent on maintaining certain safety and production standards. Any negligence resulting in worker casualties could trigger a review by the Territorial Mining Commission. With this knowledge, Olivia formulated a plan. It was risky, potentially scandalous, and would require courage from all involved. But if successful, it might free her from Parker's grip while protecting her father's interests. First, she needed to speak with Kyle, who was recovering at the hotel under the doctor's supervision. Getting past Mrs. Whitmore would require subterfuge. I should visit the church to finalize arrangements for the wedding, Olivia told her chaperone after lunch. Reverend Phillips requested confirmation of several details. Mrs. Whitmore nodded approvingly. A sensible errand. I shall accompany you, of course. Naturally, Olivia agreed. Though I was hoping you might also deliver this list of final arrangements to the hotel for the reception. Mr. Parker was most insistent that they receive it today, and Father is occupied at the mine. The older woman hesitated, clearly torn between her duties. Perhaps we could visit the hotel first, then proceed to the church together. The Reverend is available only between 1 and 2 o'clock, Olivia improvised. We would miss him entirely if we detour to the hotel first. After further negotiation, it was agreed that Mrs. Whitmore would deliver the list to the hotel while Olivia met with the Reverend. They would reconvene at the church in 30 minutes. As soon as Mrs. Whitmore departed for the hotel, Olivia hurried not to the church, but to the doctor's office adjacent to it. The doctor, sympathetic to her situation and no admirer of Parker, agreed to let her see Kyle briefly. Kyle was sitting up in bed when she entered, his head still bandaged but his color much improved. His face lit up at the sight of her. "Olivia," he breathed, reaching for her hand. "I feared Parker would keep you under lock and key after yesterday." "He's trying," Olivia replied, clasping his hand tightly. "I have only a few minutes before my watchdog returns. Kyle, I need your help." Quickly, she outlined what she had discovered in the contract and the beginnings of her plan. Kyle listened intently, his expression growing serious. "It could work," he said when she finished. "But the risk to you is nothing compared to a lifetime with Parker," Olivia insisted. "Will you help me?" Kyle's blue eyes held hers, filled with determination and something deeper. "You know I would do anything for you, Olivia, anything." The intensity of his gaze made her heart race. In that moment, surrounded by the sterile simplicity of the doctor's office, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she loved this man, had always loved him, would always love him, no matter what the future held. 2 days, she said, reluctantly releasing his hand as she heard the church bell chime the half-hour. "Be ready." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of wedding preparations and careful, secret planning. Olivia played her part perfectly, the demure bride-to-be, attending fittings, approving flower arrangements, smiling politely at Parker's increasingly possessive behavior. All the while, Kyle was setting their plan in motion. Through the doctor, he communicated with trusted miners, gathered evidence of Parker's negligence, and made arrangements for what would come after. On the morning before her wedding day, Olivia woke before dawn. The house was quiet, Mrs. Whitmore still asleep in the adjoining room. Moving silently, Olivia dressed in her simplest gown, packed a small valise with essentials, and slipped downstairs to her father's study. Harold was already there as they had arranged. His face was grave but resolved. "The sheriff will be here at 7, he said without preamble. "Are you certain about this, Olivia? Once begun, there's no turning back." "I'm certain, father," she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Are the documents ready?" Harold nodded, indicating a stack of papers on his desk. "All the evidence we could gather of Parker's negligence at the mine, statements from workers about unsafe conditions, and the territorial inspector's preliminary report on the collapse. The tampering wasn't conclusively proven, but there's enough to warrant a full investigation." "And the other matter?" Olivia asked hesitantly, her father's expression softened. "It's done. I've transferred the Morgan property back to Kyle along with a fair compensation for its use these past years. It was the right thing to do." Olivia embraced her father, tears threatening. "Thank you." "I should be thanking you," Harold replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me what true courage looks like, Olivia. Your mother would be proud." At precisely 7 o'clock, Sheriff Davis arrived at the Grayson home. He was accompanied by 2 deputies, and a stern-looking man Olivia recognized as Judge Harmon from the territorial court in Tucson. They were barely settled in the parlor when a furious pounding on the front door announced Parker's arrival. Martha, the housekeeper, showed him in, her expression carefully neutral. Parker stopped short at the sight of the gathering. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his gaze fixing accusingly on Olivia. "Mr. Parker," Sheriff Davis said formally, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of criminal negligence resulting in bodily harm, attempted fraud, and witness intimidation. This is absurd, Parker sputtered, his composure slipping. Harold, what nonsense is this? Harold stood, his posture straight, his voice firm. No nonsense, Parker. The Territorial Mining Inspector's report is quite clear. The support beams in the North Tunnel were deliberately compromised on your direct orders, according to Foreman Wilson. You can't possibly believe 3 sworn statements from miners who overheard your instructions to Wilson, Sheriff Davis interrupted, producing a document. Plus evidence of similar incidents at mines you've controlled in Colorado and Nevada. Parker's face contorted with rage. This is your doing, he spat at Olivia. You and that saddle tramp Morgan. Mr. Morgan provided valuable testimony, the sheriff acknowledged, but the evidence stands on its own. What about our contract, Grayson? Parker demanded. Your daughter is mine, legally bound to marry me tomorrow. Without my investment, you're ruined. About that, Judge Harmon interjected, adjusting his spectacles. I've reviewed the agreement. While unusually specific about personal matters for a business contract, it does contain standard provisions voiding all obligations in case of fraudulent or criminal activity by either party. Meaning, Harold added with satisfaction, that your arrest releases us from all contractual obligations, including Olivia's hand in marriage. Parker's face darkened with fury. This isn't over. I have connections. Your connections won't help you this time, Sheriff Davis said, signaling his deputies forward. The territorial governor himself has taken an interest in this case. Seems you've crossed one too many powerful men, Parker. As the deputies led Parker away, his threats and protestations echoing through the house, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The nightmare was ending, her future uncertain but her own stretched before her. That evening, as news of Parker's arrest spread through Oro Blanco, Kyle came to call at the Grayson home. Harold welcomed him warmly, a marked contrast to his previous coolness. Mr. Morgan, he said, extending his hand. It seems I owe you an apology, along with my gratitude. Kyle shook Harold's hand firmly. No apologies needed, sir. We all did what was necessary. Harold glanced between Kyle and Olivia, a knowing smile touching his lips. If you'll excuse me, I have some business correspondence to attend to. Olivia, perhaps you'd like to show Kyle the garden. The roses are particularly fine this evening. Left alone in the garden, Kyle and Olivia walked in companionable silence for a moment, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. So, Kyle said finally, it appears you're no longer engaged to be married. It appears not, Olivia agreed, a smile playing at her lips. A fortunate escape, wouldn't you say? Kyle stopped beneath the old oak tree, turning to face her. Very fortunate for everyone concerned. What happens now? Olivia asked, suddenly serious. Parker will face trial, but his investors will want explanations about the mine. Your father's already addressing that, Kyle replied. With Parker's fraudulent activities exposed, several legitimate investors have expressed interest. Harold's reputation for honesty works in his favor. And what about you? Olivia asked softly. Will you return to Texas, to your ranch? Kyle took her hands in his expression solemn yet tender. That depends entirely on you, Olivia. On me. I built that ranch with you in mind, Kyle said, his voice low and intense. Every decision, every improvement, I pictured sharing it with you, but if your future lies here in Oro Blanco, then mine does too. Olivia's heart swelled with emotion. You would stay, give up everything you've built. I would build something new, Kyle replied simply. With you. Here or in Texas or anywhere else you wanted to go. Kyle Morgan, Olivia said, her voice trembling slightly, are you proposing to me beneath this oak tree? A slow smile spread across Kyle's face. I believe I am, though not very well it seems. With fluid grace, he knelt before her, still holding her hands in his. Olivia Grayson, I have loved you since we were children playing in these very gardens. I loved you when I left to make my fortune, hoping to be worthy of you. I loved you when I returned to find you promised to another. And I love you now, more than ever, knowing the strength and courage you possess. Tears of joy spilled down Olivia's cheeks as Kyle continued. I cannot offer you the wealth or position that Parker promised, but I can offer you honesty, respect, partnership, and my whole heart for as long as I live. Will you marry me, Olivia? Not to settle a business deal or secure a fortune, but simply because we choose each other now and always. Olivia's answer was a whispered yes, before she pulled Kyle to his feet and into her embrace. Their kiss, tender yet passionate, sealed a promise that needed no contracts or legal clauses, a promise born of love freely given and gratefully received. 1 year later, Olivia stood on the wide porch of the ranch house Kyle had built for them in Texas. The setting sun bathed the rolling grasslands in golden light, herds of cattle grazing contentedly in the distance. Behind her, the sound of laughter drifted through the open door as her father regaled their dinner guests with tales of Oro Blanco's transformation. Harold visited quarterly, overseeing his share in the now thriving Grayson Morgan Mining Company while enjoying his daughter's happiness. Strong arms encircled Olivia's waist as Kyle joined her on the porch. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Morgan." Olivia leaned back against her husband's chest, savoring his warmth and strength. "I was just thinking how differently things might have turned out if you hadn't returned to Oro Blanco when you did." Kyle pressed a kiss to her temple. "Some things are meant to be, I think. We might have taken a different path, but I believe we would have found each other eventually." Olivia turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "Such a romantic cowboy I married. Only with you," Kyle admitted with a grin. "To everyone else, I'm still the tough cattle baron who drives a hard bargain." "Your secret is safe with me," Olivia promised, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Their moment was interrupted by the wail of a baby from inside the house. Kyle smiled against Olivia's lips. "Your son has excellent timing." "Your son," Olivia corrected with a laugh. "He gets that from you." Together, they returned inside to where their 3-month-old son, James Harold Morgan, was being fussed over by his doting grandfather. As Olivia took her son in her arms, soothing his cries with a mother's instinctive touch, she caught Kyle watching them with undisguised love and pride. This was the future she had chosen, not a business arrangement or a social advancement, but a partnership built on love, respect, and shared dreams. In the darkest moments of her engagement to Parker, Olivia had feared she would never know true happiness. Now, surrounded by family in a home created with love, she knew that happiness wasn't something bestowed by circumstance or purchased through advantageous marriages. It was built day by day, choice by choice, with the courage to follow one's heart even when the path seemed uncertain. As if reading her thoughts, Kyle came to stand beside her, one arm around her shoulders, the other gently stroking their son's downy head. "No regrets?" he asked softly. Olivia looked up at her husband, her heart full to bursting. "Not one." Outside, the Texas sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, a fitting end to another day in a life chosen, not dictated, a life that had begun truly on the day a determined cowboy had looked at a business arrangement and declared with unwavering certainty, "She's not part of any deal."